This all started about a year ago. I lived on the second floor of an apartment complex and have lived there my entire life. The building is mostly comprised of families with young children and married couples. A lot of families have lived here as long as my family has, so everyone knows each other pretty well. There is only one apartment unit that isn't occupied by a family, but rather a pair of brothers who keep to themselves. One day, one of their sons around my age appeared out of the blue. He was strange off the bat. He would always wear a sweatshirt with the hood up, and he would run through the apartment complex to get to his apartment. I'm not sure what his face looked like because he always had the hood over it. He lived on the first floor, on the back side of the complex, and would often get into his place by jumping through the window. He basically did everything in his power to avoid any interaction. I didn't mind him because I never saw him due to my busy schedule. However, one day he started sitting on the top of the staircase that leads to my apartment. This was strange because his apartment unit was on the other side of the complex and on the first floor. I brushed it off at first, but it started happening every day. When I would come home from school, he was there. When my boyfriend at the time would drop me off at night, typically around 10:30 or 11, he would be there. Sometimes when I would leave and come back hours later, he would still be in the exact same spot, as if he didn't move throughout the 5 hours that I was gone. At this point, I told my parents and my boyfriend about it, and they became very vigilant. My boyfriend would park his car and walk me to the door every night that he dropped me off. Once he saw my boyfriend, he stopped sitting on the staircase and I thought it was over, but it wasn't. He started waiting for me at my bus stop. The bus that I take home from school stops right across the street from my home, so it's a short walk. One day when I was getting off, I saw him waiting at the bus stop. Once he saw me get off, he followed me into the complex and sat on the staircase. He also started following me when I would walk my dog. At this point, my parents were upset. My mom started letting the neighbors know he was following me around. My neighbors started making sure that he wasn't bothering me, or if I was alone, they would start a conversation with me until I got into my door. One day, I got a friend request on Facebook from this guy. Mind you, he had never spoken a word to me, so how did he know my name, let alone find me on Facebook? My mom tried talking to his father, but they would never answer the door when my mom knocked on it. So I'm thinking, it can't possibly get any worse, right? He seemed harmless, so I wasn't too worried. I was wrong. One day when I returned from my boyfriend's house, my mom told me that she had something to tell me, but she didn't want me to get spooked. She proceeded to tell me that when she was walking towards the kitchen to get a glass of water, she saw something in the tree move. Our kitchen has a huge window that takes up most of the wall. In front of the window, there's a huge tree. If someone were to climb it, they could see right into our apartment. Well, guess what? When my mom took a closer look, she realized my neighbor was sitting in the tree looking straight into the apartment. My mom called my dad over, and when my neighbor saw my dad, he jumped off the tree. At that moment, I felt my peace stolen from me. We filed a police report, but when the police went looking for him, he was gone. It turned out that there were snack wrappers and a blanket hidden in between the leaves of the trees. The police think that it wasn't the first time that he was up in the tree. I couldn't help but wonder how many times he saw me walking around and I had no idea. It's been about 6 months and I haven't seen him since. His father still lives in the complex, but there's no sight of him. The police haven't been able to find him, so I have no idea what happened to him, but I hope that we never meet again. This happened yesterday, and I still can't believe that it happened. I'll explain it all at the end. I'm sorry if it's confusing at first. I recently moved into a new flat 3 weeks ago, and I'm sharing it with my sister. The only person that we know properly is a single mother who lives in the apartment next door to us. Ever since we moved in, she's been giving us advice and helping us out with things. We don't know anyone else properly yet. Our neighbors are mostly couples in their late 20s or 30s, or older guys who live alone. We're probably the youngest ones here. We're both females. I'm 18 and my sister is only 16. Today, I was out with some friends and then later on, I went to the gym. After this, I went to get my sister so we could go out for some food. We got in at around 10 p.m. Me and my sister got into our pajamas and were just sitting around watching TV when our buzzer rang. I jumped up to answer it, and it turned out to be our neighbor, the single mother. I asked her what was up, and she said that our dad's asking for us downstairs. Straight away, my stomach dropped, and I immediately asked her if she's sure that he said he was our dad. The reason that I asked her was just to make sure that's what she actually had said, but she replied that yeah, he said that he was our dad and he was asking for us. The neighbor asked if she could let him up to our flat, but I told her no. I wanted to shout out to my sister, but I didn't want to worry her right away. I asked the neighbor not to let him come up yet, and I heard her repeat this to him. I couldn't hear anything for a few minutes and I started to get really worried. At this point, my sister comes up to me and asked who it is. I called out to my neighbor a few times. It must have only been about 5 minutes, but it honestly felt like ages when she didn't reply. I was actually about to tell my sister to call 000 because I was starting to panic and I didn't know what to do. And then she came back on and told me that he was gone. She then came up to our flat and explained what went down. She said that she was walking back to her flat after finishing work and saw a man by the buzzers. At first, she assumed that it was just someone who lived there, until he noticed her walking up. He asked for us by name and if she could let him up to our flat. She asked him who he was and he told her that he was our dad. Now obviously, she buzzed us and told us first, as our neighbor doesn't know us that well, so she doesn't know what our dad looks like. She said that because we're young, she didn't want to buzz in a strange man up to our flat. She said that her motherly instinct kicked in when she heard my hesitation to let him up to the flat. Apparently after he heard me say that, he got really pushy with her and started trying to move her out of the way. He kept on saying to her, "It's okay, I'm their dad. Let me in, I'm not gonna do anything." She started arguing with him and asking him to tell her his name, but he refused to tell her. She told him that if I don't feel comfortable letting him in, there's no way he's getting in. His reaction was to call her a bitch and then get in his car and ride away. Now this is the reason that I hesitated. We haven't spoke to our dad since I was 16. We even considered getting a restraining order from him at one point. He's not our biological father, but we were legally adopted by him when I was 9. He was both emotionally and physically abusive to our mom and had started to do the same to me. It got to the point where we had to leave him in the middle of the night. After this, he became very controlling and would secretly follow us and record me and my sister. He had a criminal record as well, and I believe he was convicted of manslaughter in the 80s. I have no idea of the backstory behind that, and honestly, I don't want to know. Like I said, we haven't heard from him recently, and as soon as she said the word dad, I almost had a panic attack. I asked her to describe him, and she said that because it was dark out, she couldn't really see him. We ended up staying with her because my sister and I were really shaken up. I don't know whether to call the police or not. I don't know if it was really him or not, as it could easily have been someone else. I live in a house on a cul-de-sac with my mom, 2 brothers, and a roommate. I work 2 part-time jobs, one of which is in the same office my mom works at. She's a doctor and I work with the medical records. I'm 20, my brothers are twins, 17, and my mom is 57, and their roommate is 18. We also live very close to a volunteer firehouse that blares an extremely loud alarm when there's an emergency. Everyone within a couple miles can hear the alarm. We are middle class and live in a modest home. but I have a large front yard because our driveway is super long. 7 years ago, we moved into our house, and for a while, everything was chill. Until we found out about our crazy neighbor. I'll be calling him Bob for privacy reasons. Bob has extremely paranoid schizophrenia and legitimately believes that the government is after him. He thinks that people are trying to brainwash him via microwaves, and he freaks out whenever he hears a plane pass by because he thinks that they're after him. Whenever the firehouse blares the alarm, Bob calls the police because he thinks someone is coming after him, and every time they have to tell him that he can't do that. He has also made some odd comments about one of my brothers as well. For a few years, we didn't hear much from him until one day, he sent a letter in the mail trying to sell us his baseball cards for $1 million. Apparently, he had sent the same letter to everyone else in the cul-de-sac. Everyone discarded the letters. All of our neighbors are aware of Bob. They thought that he was just a little crazy, but mainly harmless. We thought so too. We were so wrong. Last winter, we began to find mysterious footprints in the snow. It was a human's footprint across the front of our house. We knew that it wasn't any of our footprints because none of us walked so far out into that part of our front yard like that. As I said earlier, our front yard is very large. We just shrugged it off as something odd. For a while, Bob hadn't bothered us, and we weren't thinking much of him at the time. Flash forward to a few days ago. Police were at Bob's house. Apparently he's being evicted. We kind of breathed a sigh of relief because he was weird, but we didn't think much of it. The next day after that was a normal day. Nothing odd, that was, until Bob showed up at work. He began to rant to everyone about how he's in the military, before going to my mom's secretary and asking to have lab work done on him. This was raising a bunch of red flags, because my mom never told him where she worked. Not only that, but to find my mom's secretary, you would have to go back behind the main row of secretaries. Each doctor has their own, and there are about 15 secretaries in total, each with their own desk, into a smaller area where a large printer is. My mom's secretary is in that smaller area, and it should be impossible for a stranger who hasn't been there before to know where she is. How the hell did Bob know where to find my mom's secretary, and ask for my mom, despite not ever being there before, and my mom never telling him her name? This freaked us out, and we decided to do some more research on Bob. It turns out that his dad was ex-military, and that Bob owns a bunch of firearms. Bob's shady behavior towards my mom and showing up at our work could only mean one thing. This man is stalking us and he's dangerous. At the very least, we had begun to suspect that he's been going through our mail. It was also likely his footprints that were in the snow of our yard last winter. My mom got a peace order. It's kind of like a restraining order, rather quickly, and then notified all of the other neighbors about what had happened. We thought maybe things would die down now, but nope. Today, he was in the parking lot of work, staring blankly at one of the secretaries. She said that he was sweating and looked a little off. He didn't stop staring at her. He asked her about my mom again. Everyone in the family is on edge. He has guns and has been stalking my mom at work, and is being evicted. He doesn't have much to lose if he did something dangerous to us. We notified the police and are making sure to lock the doors and install security cameras so that we can see if he comes onto the property again. It's been a few months since everything has happened, and I just wanted to update you guys and say that he isn't bothering us anymore. Hopefully things stay the same. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my little house feel even more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around that house. I didn't see anybody nearby, so I ignored it and I went inside. I had just gotten off shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't even 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I had heard a noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work, on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and I picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9-something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone aside and I called out my friend's name. There were a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and I ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time that I had opened the door and stepped inside. That house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, the one that I was in and a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when my bedroom door bursted open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which just had boxes stacked in a corner, some weights and a table where I painted my miniature models. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic, just a foot or so away from the access, so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from about their knee down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. That scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for severe mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain that I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped. I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided that it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was that the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise that I'd heard after he stepped away from the closet. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and I called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped. All the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened and all the boxed and canned foods had been thrown to the ground. As far as I could tell though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line, along with some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said people often use to smoke meth. So they think that he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me that I should stay with family or friends tonight and get that door fixed as soon as possible. I opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it across the fence line, where the police found these cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at that house though. I lived there another 3 years without an incident. One more precaution I took was practicing getting out of my bed, going to my closet and climbing into the attic as quickly and quietly as possible. I even kept at it when I moved. Except now, I go to a crawl space at the back of my closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting to the attic, or if he hadn't gone to the bathroom at the end of the hallway first. I lived in Japan for around 10 months a couple of years back as part of a study abroad program as my placement year for university. I lived in Hiroshima, and pretty much every Japanese person I met was exactly how you would expect them. Generous and respectful. All except this one old lady who just so happened to live in the apartment next to me. It was about a month after I had been in Japan. Originally, I'm from Northern Ireland, so it was quite an adjustment to make. When our group decided that we were going to go to the Saho Sake Festival. For those who don't know, this is a huge sake, a rice wine drinking festival, that from what I now understand, everyone goes and gets extremely drunk. As men of fine taste and culture, we sampled many different kinds of sake from all over Japan and got rolled off beyond belief. Then we all got the train back home to our apartments. I can't remember anything, all apart from calling my girlfriend at the time and passing out on my futon. Normal stuff. Skip to 6 a.m. the next morning, when my loud doorbell wakes me up. Keep in mind, my apartment is extremely small, so the noise is extremely loud. I check the time and I'm confused as anything, but assume it's just a friend from downstairs who wants to talk about last night. I look through the peephole in the door and I see a police officer standing there. The first thought that went through my mind was, Taylor, what did you do when you were drunk last night? But at the same time, I was so sure that I just fell asleep right away. I talked to the dude using a translation app and he basically tells me that there's been a noise complaint. It's strange considering the fact that all I did was make a phone call and fall asleep. Anyway, the guy sees how confused I am and kinda just sees there must have been a mistake and leaves. I'm honestly still drunk and just super confused, but the day carries on as normal. The next morning, 6 a.m., the doorbell rings. I already kind of assumed what it was gonna be. But what do I see through the peephole this time? 2 police officers. The same conversation goes down and I convince them that there's been no noise. I literally walk into my apartment to show them how I fell asleep watching Netflix. They tell me at this point that it's the neighbor, who I've never met, that's making the complaints. At this point, I think she's just got a problem with me. I ask the guy at my university who takes care of all the foreign students about this, and he tells me that I'm getting moved apartments to a room on the floor below. I'm pretty upset because I had just gotten settled into my new space, but whatever. He plans to come tomorrow morning with the landlord to move my stuff out and check if the new room is okay. Ever get when you're woken up by something in the middle of the night, and it really messes you up? I went to sleep at a good time that night and prepped for the people helping me move my stuff tomorrow. So naturally, at 3 a.m., I'm fast asleep. And then suddenly, my doorbell just goes off. It's constantly ringing. It's deafening, and of course it has woken me up straight away. I can't even begin to tell you how scared I was. Couldn't even move, I didn't want to. After about a minute of what felt like incessant noise, complete silence, I make my way over to the front door to look through the peephole, and I see nothing. But I just know it's that psycho neighbor. Nothing else happens that night, and I eventually get back to sleep. I wake up the next morning, still kind of shaken, but it's cool because my boys are coming around soon. I keep walking up the front to check if they're downstairs, and quickly close my door behind me because I don't know what this woman will try if she sees me. I walk into my room and I slide the door to the balcony open, and then I see her for the first time. She literally wrapped her body around the fence that separates our balconies while keeping her footing on the side, and is just staring right at me. We stare at each other for a second, and then she quickly whips back around onto her side. Literally 2 seconds later, my doorbell rings, and I'm just like, no way, that's not possible. This is some demon or something. Thank God it turns out to be the people to help me move my stuff, and I tell them what's up and hastily move downstairs to my new room. Outside of her turning up at my new room once and asking if the police had came there, I was able to avoid her from then on out. I guess the police decided to start ignoring her calls. So, crazy old lady, let's not meet.